Roger Allers, you're the director of the animated film The Prophet, which is based on the book by Kahlil Gibran. How did you first become familiar with Gibran and this book?
It was given to me when I was in college, and the first time I read it, it was really profound. It was really profound. The first time I read it, I had just moved into some apartment building. It was like my second year in college, and I met this girl at the pool and all that sort of thing. And I had just been given the book, and we started talking about it, and then we wound up reading this book together. I mean, it's quite a strange first date, but that's what we did. And it by the time I got to the end of the book, or even a little before I got to the end of the book, I just had a very profound reaction to it. It was like one of these sort of consciousness shift things. I felt very connected to everything. It had a very significant shift on me. So yeah, it meant a lot. But then, quite honestly, I read it for a few years, and then there were lots of years in between when I hadn't dipped back into it. So when I was asked if I'd like to direct and write on it, I was really excited to do it, for one, and for another, it was a chance to get back into the book and really examine it again. You have a different perspective later in life than you do, obviously, when you're a college student.
Was there any nervousness at all, since you were familiar with the material and it meant so much to you that you would be bringing this to the screen?
A little bit, mostly. Yeah, I mean, mostly I was so excited about it. And as a matter of fact, I got the email asking me about this, and it had been sent at the beginning of the Thanksgiving weekend. So 4 days went by. I didn't check my emails. We had lots of family. And at the end, 4 days later, I looked at it, and it was sort of like I had a panic that, oh my God, maybe they've asked somebody in the meantime, and I'm not going to be able to do it. It really meant that much to me. I fired off, communication really quickly, just because I was so eager to do it. But yeah, there was a little bit of nervousness. I wanted to do right by the book, and since my job was to expand the story, because there's very little story in the book, I definitely wanted to do right by Kahlil. I kind of felt like maybe he was sort of sitting on my shoulder while we were doing this thing, and so I did lots of research on his life and read some of his other books, and got very familiar with him and tried to have him there with me. It was fun. In the little studio, we had a little studio in Santa Monica, which was like about 3 rooms big, because most of this was done over Skype. And crazy. We had a picture of him up in the bathroom. So it was like whenever you went to the bathroom, you could kind of go, hey, check in with him,
As mentioned, this isn't a traditional kind of narrative to try and make into a film, and you expanded the story a bit. What were the biggest challenges in adapting it for the screen?
Well, I mean, one of the challenges was Selma asked me right at the beginning in our first conversation, because I assumed, oh, this is going to be an adult film or a young adult film, art film, right? And the first thing she said was, I want this to appeal and be accessible to all people from like age 5 to 95. And I was like, wow, okay. That's a tall order, because, the poems, it's not that vocabulary-wise they're difficult, but the ideas are deep. And I thought, okay, how do I make a story that has these poems grow out of the story, out of the narrative, easily and gracefully, and how do I make something that's going to appeal to children as well as adults? That was one of the tricky things. So it was, in terms of introducing humor into the story, I felt like I had to do it very carefully, very gently, because I didn't want to. I couldn't get into the poems if I got too silly or too slapstick. Although I did go a little slapstick in a couple of places. So that was really tricky. I think one of the big ideas that helped in terms of attracting a younger audience was the idea of making the child character as a central character to help take us through the story. And that one very much was, we went that direction to help give a guide, basically, for the younger viewers to travel with this little girl and kind of discover these things along with her. But I wanted it also to be sophisticated. Sorry for interrupting you. I also wanted it to be sophisticated. I wanted to deal with some deep issues, you know, and it is issues of life and death and your freedom and all those sort of things.
Yeah, the film uses different animation styles and different animation directors to represent each of the different poems. And when I talked to Salma yesterday, she told me that the directors were actually given complete free reign to interpret the poems however they wished. And being the main director of the film, you know, was it challenging to relinquish some of the creative control like that? Were you concerned about how it would come together?
Absolutely, I was concerned about how it would come together. For one thing, you don't know in the beginning, right? And all these artists, I mean, for one thing, that was also one of the things that was very appealing about this project, was the idea that I would work with all these different people, because I have so much respect for them. Some of them are friends, you know, most of them, a lot of them I hadn't met before and really only worked with them over Skype. Some of them I've never met face to face. But I was really looking forward to working with all these people because they're all so talented. And I thought it was very exciting to bring different artistic visions, you know, to the film. So, and again, it sort of celebrates poetry and the way people interpret poetry, you know, rather than just one person. If I had done it all, it would have just been me. But this, I think, you know, expresses how all of these people around the world can respond to poetry, and definitely all in their own ways. But yeah, it was a little nervous making, because in the beginning, you know, before they even would turn in a storyboard to me, and I did have, you know, the opportunity to, you know, give notes at the storyboard level so that I could help blend things together to help, you know, stitch the narrative into the poems. I mean, for one thing, I asked people was to try to stay away from creating independent storylines, you know, big storylines that had beginning, middles, and ends in these poems. I encouraged them to focus on interpreting the text rather than creating another story. Because if we had a storyline and then these other stories would pop up, it would become very confusing. But by them really focusing on Gibran's words, it was very much integrated, you know, into the whole. Artistically, trying to get in and out of the scenes, some of those I could plan ahead when we had the artwork, and for some, you know, their visions changed a little as they worked on it, and I had to be more improvisational as to how to stitch them in.
You know, there are a number of recognizable voice actors in this film, like Liam Neeson, who plays the main character, and he gives voice to many of the poems, and you know, Salma Hayek does a voice. Alfred Molina is in it. What was the casting process like to come up with the right voices for this story?
Well, you know, as it usually is in being a film, it's kind of a group process. People all brainstorm. People put lists of names together. You pull up scenes from old movies to listen to the voice, you know, the voices of the actors, to hear how would they mesh with the character. I mean, casting Mustafa with Liam Neeson, I mean, Mustafa was a really critical character because obviously his voice fills 90% of the film. So it had to be a voice. I mean, you had to feel for this character, and it also had to be a voice that you could listen to a lot of, you know, that wouldn't become irritating or, you know what I mean, overstay its welcome. And his voice has such a warmth, and again, there's a little something of that Irish, you know, mellifluous sense of rhythm that runs through his voice that really makes it easy to listen to. He's fantastic with poetry. I think he should record albums of poetry. I think he'd be great to listen to. But he was so prepared. He knew the material. He knew those poems, and he loved the poems. So when he came in to record them, he was so well prepared. We didn't have a lot of time to record. We spent one day recording the dialogue and one day recording the poems. That was it.
Another big part of the film and its effect is the music of it, and you've got you know, Gabriel Yared who composed the score, and you've got different essays and poems set to music and sung. What was it like working, you know, on the music for the film, and was that a process that was sort of that helped bring the individual animators and the shorter films together?
I think definitely the music is very much a force for coherence in the whole movie. For one thing, because Gabriel was doing the score that would lead into the poems, and then he was also doing the poems, except for the 2 songs. He could really orchestrate the lead in to those things. And the poems, each one has a very unique kind of feel to it or nationality to it. So they're different in themselves, but since he was also doing the score, he could do it gracefully. I think his, I'm so crazy about his score. I think he's so brilliant. But I think, yes, he was a huge force for helping everything stitch together. Definitely so. It was fun working with him. I got to meet him in Paris, and we could sit down with the whole movie. It was just in a rough form. You know, a lot of it was just story reels. But we could talk about the feeling of each scene and talk about the feeling of the poems. And right there in his home, he kind of even came up with some ideas and would kind of doodle things out, you know, on the keyboard for me, giving some examples. So it was very collaborative and, again, very improvisational. I think that's one thing that this film really feels like. I mean, all animated films are very collaborative, but this one, because of the kind of independent elements that come together and then kind of blend into a whole, it's very jazzy. You know what I mean? Kind of, you know, improv and jamming with people. Of course, there's me behind the scenes trying to orchestrate things a little bit to help them blend, but I really enjoyed that aspect of the process.
The film was distributed in the United States by GKids, which in recent years they've done a lot to bring a lot of different kinds of animation to the forefront. You know, in addition to what the mass market usually sees, whatever is coming out of Disney and Pixar and those sorts of often computer animated projects these days.
Right.
What was it like to have them backing this film?
What's it like to have them backing this film?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, terrific! I mean, they have such a great track record. I mean, one of the films that I was so excited about was Tom Moore's first film. He did Secret of Kells, that beautiful little film about the Irish monks, illuminating manuscripts. And so I knew that when I learned that GKids was going to distribute this, I was really excited because, they had gotten Tom Moore's work out in front of the public. So anybody who could do that is really high up in my books.
This film, Tom Moore has gotten some Oscar attention for his work, and this film has gotten already some awards attention this season. It got several nominations at the Ante Awards. It's up for Best Independent Animated Feature, which is a new category there, and you're nominated for Best Directing. How did it feel to have the film recognized in that way?
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, it's great. There are a lot of films out there. There are a lot of contenders and a lot of really worthy projects out there. There are a lot of really worthy films. So to get the nomination in that way, it's an honor, to have that distinction, to have that recognition. I appreciate it.
You previously co-directed one of the biggest animated films of this era, The Lion King, which, I mean, is it a very different kind of experience making a film like that compared to this, or is behind the scenes, is it really sort of, the same process?
I think at its base, it's the same process, right? You have to come up with a story that engages people and entertains people and create characters and integrate music if you're doing it. But of course, working in the structure of a huge studio like Disney, that's a very different experience from this one. There's a lot of support, a lot of internal support. At Disney, it's a lot of people. I can't call to mind how many hundreds of people worked on Lion King. Not so on this one. And so a lot of us, we're doing double duty and triple duty on this. People were doing not just that job, but the other job. Like our production manager here in LA was also very much in communication with all the people in foreign countries who were the contributing animators. And he was also our tech guy, and he also supplied a lot of equipment. Everybody it's really that kind of, you know, it's a small time band, and everybody's working to fill in all the gaps. So I think everybody worked about 3 times. How can I say that you work 3 times harder than on a big production? I shouldn't say that, because everything is hard work. But this one we had to cover a lot of bases.
Now, you know, having been familiar with the Prophet, the book itself, and now bringing it to audiences, potentially a lot of audiences, including young audiences who might not be previously familiar with it, what do you most hope people will take away from this film?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, I'll be so happy if it does expose a whole new audience, a whole new generation to the book, because I think there's some beautiful, profound stuff in the book. And I think, as I said, if you revisit it through your life after you've had different experiences, you have different responses to it. You know, like when you become a parent, you know, you some of the poems will have different meanings for you, and things like that. The perspective of life experience. But in a general way, in a really big sort of way, I hope it goes out and it's a force for healing. You know, I hope it's a force for getting people in touch with their inner lives and being a kind of a force for peace out there. Because I just think right at this time, especially, maybe it always feels like it, but it certainly feels like it recently, that the world needs some healing and it needs some messages of love and oneness out there. I think this movie, in Gibran's philosophy, he draws from different religions, but he doesn't, you know, it's not just one. And so it has that sense in his mysticism, he reaches that place which is kind of outside of established religions, and yet it embraces them. And that I hope this film does. I hope it brings people in an embrace, you know, to help pull people together.
Well, yeah, congratulations on the film and on the Annie nominations and potentially the Oscar nominations coming up. I mean, GKids does have a good track record there in recent years as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks, Daniel. It was great talking to you.